Welcome back to the Five Star Counsel podcast. This week we're doing something a little different. Greg Steele, family lawyer from Anderson, South Carolina, is joining us. He reached out mostly because he and I have been talking for the last few years anyway about things like this, but wanted to talk about, well, what does specific help for him and his practice look like? Greg and I have been talking for the last half hour about a few things, so we're not going to share you those details, but the rest of this, we're going to share. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here. I've appreciated you over the years, and I'm glad to be able to do this and get your help in this way.
So, Greg, we talk about how we can help lawyers build the law firm that would have been built by the founders of Disney, Four Seasons, Amazon, and Zappos, and my dog Molly in the background. The reality is every firm is different, and your firm's going to look different than other firms. We're starting with you because, well, frankly, you asked first. So we're going to go through a few things and see, well, what does it look like? What can you be thinking about? Really, where should we be going with your firm? So let's start first and foremost. Where are you going? What do you want your firm to look like?
I would like to be able to continue to serve families in Anderson and the surrounding areas. I don't think I want to grow this huge multi-state or even statewide practice, but I think if it was me and I currently have paralegal and a VA, if we were to grow a little bit, add a few attorneys, add a few more support staff, and be able to serve our 5, 6 county area, particularly those rural counties, I think that's where I'd like to see my practice go.
So we all have to eat. And the question I'm going to ask next is not about, hey, I need to eat. I've got you've got an insatiable thirst for food, clothing, and shelter. We all do. But why are you doing family law in Anderson, South Carolina?
I really Anderson is the easy answer to the question. It's where I was born and raised. I have a real passion for this community. I really loved growing up here. I still have a lot of family, still have a lot of friends here, and I chose kind of after going off to law school, looking at where could I settle down. I really looked at my hometown and said, I want to come back and invest in my community, the community that invested in me. And why family law is, I also really wanted to do that for really what I call real people's problems. I spent some time early in practice in a federal clerkship where I was doing a lot with reading documents, doing legal research, doing legal writing, and I realized I wanted to interface with people's everyday problems. And so when I came back, family law made sense for that, and that really has been that for me. I really like helping people with their families. I really enjoy working with families and children, and family law is a good way for me to be able to do that.
Got it. So we know where you are. For those who are turning in and have never heard about Anderson, South Carolina, maybe give 2 or 3 sentences just so they've got a little more context.
I would say it's a kind of semi-rural community. We're close to Greenville, South Carolina, which is one of the biggest cities in South Carolina, but it's about 45 minutes away, and we have a much smaller town. Our town is about 35,000, and as soon as you get outside of the town itself, it gets pretty rural pretty quick. So there's a little bit of suburban growth up toward Greenville, but a lot of the county is very rural, and it's very small town feel. Everyone kind of knows everyone, and you're usually 2 degrees separation from anyone else who's been here for a while. So that's kind of the feel, is that small town south.
Good. So now we're going to get into a little bit more. We talk about this all the time. What's the needle that you move? Put another way, you're helping clients to get to the top of their mountaintop. You're guiding them there. Describe what that mountaintop is for your clients.
I think that mountaintop for my clients is getting to the best place for them and their families in very trying times. So everyone who comes to me is often facing a divorce. There may be trying to figure out the best way to share parenting time with an ex in a custody situation. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take all the kind of uncertainty and fear surrounding that, and what does it look like to live life apart from this spouse that I've been with. What does it look like to have this time with my kid, and to help them navigate the complex family court system and move toward a place where they can have the time with their kids that they want, that they can have move forward with their lives instead of kind of sitting in limbo with separation, with a separation, or with even in the non-divorce context with time with their kid and parenting time with their kid.
Okay. So what I liked about that, Greg, was that was pretty plain English. There was no jargon. Sure, you use the words divorce and separation, but at a certain point, we have to describe this. It wasn't, well, I have a motion-based practice where I, blah, 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 litigation words that I don't even know. That's good because it's not just you and this firm. You've got two other folks who are working for you. What I liked about it is you're getting your families, your clients to a better place for them in trying times. Have you expressed this? Does your paralegal and does your VA know that this is what you are doing for your clients?
I think my paralegal does know. I don't know if I've stated it in those specific explicit terms, which is one of the helpful reasons I'm here, is to kind of think about and verbalize those things. But I do think from her interactions with our clients as well, how she approaches her job, where she finds meaning in that, I think she would say she would share that. The VA, we're working on that. He's a brand new hire. He started 2 weeks ago, or actually a little less than 2 weeks ago. So part of that too is this is a time when I need to have those conversations and make sure that they share that same vision and mission and values that we have in place right now.
So knowing that you'll always be tweaking on what this mountaintop is, if we just left it at everybody working for Greg Steele Law is there pulling to get your clients to the best place for them and their families in trying times, is that good enough for you for right now, or do we need to spend more time on that before going elsewhere?
I actually think that that's a really, really good encapsulation of what I'm trying to do, because I don't know if I've kind of honed it down and verbalized it in that way, but that's really what I'm trying to do. I think with my firm is I think some people take a very, I guess not a family approach, but kind of an individual approach. What can this person get out of this family court action? Whereas one of the things I try to do is really focus, where is the best place for your family? And I don't think I've necessarily articulated that before this, but that's a helpful way to put it. And I think that is a great way, better than I've thought before today. So that this is already working.
Well, I mean, to be fair, those are the words that came out of your mouth,
Right.
not mine. So, but this is something where you're going to want to have this, because if you can't verbalize what you do, and granted, I think as you go through time, you're going to want to put more color on exactly what those solutions look like, so that it's not just, best place for them and their family. You're doing family law, I'm doing estate planning and probate. It could apply to both. We're going to leave that for now, but kind of think about that in a lot of ways, it's along the lines of we have combined 80 years of experience. Is that 80 consecutive years or 80 coinciding simultaneous years where you're not doing the same thing? So you talked about, and before we got started, we had talked a little bit about what you're looking for in this firm, how big you want to get. We don't need to share any of those specific numbers, but I want you to think in terms of total volume of your practice. They're kind of two easy extremes, and I know it would be a mix somewhere in the middle. But think about it as you could have the McDonald's high volume, lower touch service for your family law practice, or you could have Four Seasons, higher touch, lower volume. You'll probably be somewhere in the middle, but you're going to lean one way or another. You know your market. Where do you think you would end up if you had to, at least for the next few years, where do you think on that spectrum you're going to end up?
I would like to end up closer to the end of the lower volume, higher, more often touch points. And that's what I've really kind of tried to hone in on, even in the last couple months. And I don't know if I'm maybe, the Four Seasons, but I think I'm also much closer to that side than the McDonald's side.
And that's fine. Like both of those answers do well. McDonald's makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so it really is, we have to ask these questions up front, because if we don't, we're going to give you the wrong answers. I don't want to give you this is how we turn people over really quickly if you're not looking for that practice. and vice versa. If you were looking for the high volume because you see there's value in helping as many people as possible, we don't want to look for, well, what's the white linen napkin method that we're going to do. We're looking for more of the paper napkins. Totally fine. So let's think about this. If we're going to be more on the higher end service, what are some of the adjectives you want to describe your practice?
Responsive, compassionate, understanding.
Those are good ones. You just hired your new VA.
Yes.
How much of your interview process was designed to ensure that he was responsive, compassionate, and understanding?
I would say a good chunk of it was. I probably could have done a better job, but that is what I shared. I found him through a staffing company. Those were some of the characteristics I asked them for in the search process. And in our interview, I was asking about situations of how would you deal with a family law client who called distressed, crying on the phone. What would your reaction be? So I think I am thinking about that. I think I could have thought about that maybe in a more thorough way, but it certainly was part of the process in looking for that.
Yeah, and I would say this is what you should be doing because the people in your firm are ultimately the ones who are delivering the service. It doesn't matter how much you have running through Zapier or Calendly or any of the other automated products. You're going to have individuals who are designing what those things look like, how the automation is run. And so you have to have the right humans behind it. Now, if you were asking about it in the interview process, that's what we clearly want to get to. We don't want to just assume it. You're probably not going to be hiring anybody anytime soon, or at least not for the next few months. One person is enough at a time. The thing I'd have you start thinking about would be the interview. Instead of asking, how would you react? Thinking more about how have you reacted in similar situations in the past.
Mhm.
So having them tell you how they have actually reacted instead of what would you do? Because it's, well, great. What would you do if we had this problem? Well, I'd do the best thing I'd ever done and, I'd do it for free. They're going to give you the answer that you want to hear
Mhm.
when you want to get into the behavior based of what have they actually done when presented with a situation like this in the past. And this is where you will know what your practice looks like, what you've done, what you have seen. It's you clearly have thought about, well, what's an upset client look like to you? And not upset because of something you've done, but just the trying times you're worried about. How is the next person going to deal with a very specific situation?
Yeah, that's helpful.
So have you thought about the guarantee that you offer to your clients?
I have not. I think a lot about what I can't guarantee, particularly in family court, because it can be so unpredictable and even in some cases judge specific. So I think a lot of times I'm thinking more about I cannot promise you a specific result, and I cover that with clients a lot. I do have, even in my representation agreement, some promises like I'm always going to listen to you. I am always going to not judge you. I'm going to try to make sure that I do what I can to ensure that you're thriving. But I don't think I put it in terms of a very specific guarantee. And in fact, I probably talk more about how I can't guarantee a whole lot.
Right. And I think that's great that you're focusing on what you have control of. As much as I want to believe that I can control that, everything in a probate is going to be easy, there are things beyond my control. Obviously, an adversarial process, we can't control the outputs, but we can control the inputs. So as we think about that, thinking about how you've taken, your best clients, your favorite ones, what starting with what you did for them, we're coming here and thinking about how can we improve your process. What would you do just as a baseline that you've done that you want to do for everybody with the knowing that the follow-up is going to be, well, where do we go from here?
I think the baseline is communicating the process clearly up front. I think that has been really big for some of my best clients is kind of saying here is an overview of if you're going to get into family court, particularly with a contested matter, you're looking at being in for a long time, and here are the stages that we're going to go through, and here are the things to expect. I think I've done that well, and I would like to continue to do that. I've had a lot of clients, and even some potential clients who haven't moved forward with me, say, man, I'm leaving talking to you feeling like I understand much better where I'm at. And I think communicating that throughout the process is where I need to move forward with that, because I think often it feels a bit like fits and starts, where I'm communicating a lot at the beginning. We're rushing to get the initial documentation filed. There's usually an initial temporary hearing pretty at the front end within a month or two of the case, and then often the process just has to run its course, as there's other parts and pieces before you get to mediation or another hearing. And I think I do a really good job of communicating up front, but then when there's not an immediate task moving forward, I can stop communicating as well, and stop making sure that they understand where's the next thing in the process, and here's what we're waiting on, or here's the next step that we have to get to, and this is why we're waiting on that.
Right. And so what I'm going to pick up on here is you want to make sure clients understand things.
Yes.
And in my mind, a lot of the education you're going to have to give them is going to be similar. A divorce in Anderson County, the facts may be different, but the process is going to be largely the same. So how do you make sure that the client that comes in on Monday is going to get the same education as the client who comes in on Wednesday?
I think it would be helpful to have maybe some sort of tangible thing. Like if I had a one page brochure, white paper, or even downloadable that says, hey, here's the steps in a family court process, that they could lead with that, and that even as I'm going through that process and explaining it, it keeps me on track. Or even if I did like a video or something like that that explains, here's what the process is like, so it's make sure and record that once, so I have that consistency over time. I know I'm not missing something because I was busy or scattered or frantic that day. I think that could be helpful in bringing that consistency to helping clients understand.
Because that's going to be one of the keys of this service delivery. It's not just once in a while. It's how are you going to make sure that your standard of they get the one-page sheet and the educational video, given where you are with one paralegal and a VA right now, what needs to happen so that every client on your family law practice gets that education?
I think what needs to happen is I need to come up with a system to be able to. I first need to create that information repository, whether that is a downloadable or video or whatever. I need to create that thing first. But once I create it, I think I need to come up with a process for where and when do we share that with a client. Is it at an initial consultation and they leave with that? Is it something that we send a video the day before or the day of an initial consultation and say, please review this before you come in and see Greg, because this is going to explain a lot of the background to what he's going to discuss, and then he'll be able to discuss how he can help in your specific. Now that he's not going to have to spend however long explaining what a typical family court case looks like, which is honestly a big part of what I do right now in a lot of initial consultations, is we talk about their specifics, but I also say, here are the steps in a family court case here. So I think creating that, and then coming up with a system for delivering that to clients and even potential clients could be a way to do that, even with only 3 of us here.
Right. Because again, you're going to want to make sure, and I'm going to pick random times that work for me, and we don't need to get specific on where you are right now, because you're going to figure this out based on your clients. But I agree, knowing when you're going to get whatever this one-page summary of the family court process. One, you're going to have to create this, even if it's just you going in PowerPoint this afternoon and putting together, meet with Greg, sign engagement letter, file documents, due diligence, whatever happens in Anderson, and then making sure you know who's accountable for making sure that gets done.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to hold you to this, but where do you think the first version of this improved client education standard delivery, what do you think that looks like?
I actually think it could be a video because I've been thinking about doing this for a while. I actually rent some office space to a videographer and have loosely talked with that videographer about it. But I've also, I feel like I communicate well verbally. So having that video there that just says, hey, here's the explanation of the process, both would provide that education and potentially even build rapport ahead of even any meeting with that client. And I think that may be the deliverable that would be most effective for me in my practice.
Right. And as we think about this, a few things to keep in mind. We haven't designed anything that is somehow over the top shock and awe on this. This is a one-page PDF
Right.
and a video. And what are we going to do? We're going to make it easier for your clients because they're going to get educated,
Right.
which is always the point. We're going to make it easier for you because you don't have to run through the same thing again and again. And you've been practicing for a few years, but I can tell you from my own experience, after a few years of explaining what an executor is and what a trustee is to clients, I would get the 1,000-yard stare as I would kind of go through the motions of saying the exact same thing again. But that video allows it to be pretty quick, and I only have to record that once. You're also making it easy for your staff because that same thing you're going to tell your clients, obviously they're getting educated as well, so it's not all stuck in your head.
Right.
Okay, so it seems like we've got one good improvement for you there.
Absolutely.
Got a little bit of time. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of how you can make things better for you and your practice?
I think that there is a sense in which with service, kind of pricing as connected to service, because I've found I'm kind of, without going into too many nuts and bolts, kind of on the traditional hourly retainer model right now. And I've found that part of what conflict in delivering my service comes from is often the both the unpredictability of that and the kind of sense of, I guess, the nickel and dime sense of like, oh well, you had to call opposing counsel and I got billed for that. So thinking about how can I deliver my services in a better way through pricing to both deliver better value for my clients, allow me to continue to do what I do and not have, because that feels like another place where the gears grind a little bit is billing and invoicing and the way that structure works, and
Right.
trying to move away from that.
Exactly. It's when you bill hourly, you are charging your clients for your ignorance.
Right.
Ultimately, this is something we've talked about with Mike Whalen a few times, Jonathan Stark as well, because he is self-proclaimed the hourly billing guy, or the hourly billing is nuts guy. When you can set yourself apart by saying this is what it's going to cost, you are taking some of the risk away from your clients. The hard part is you don't know how much risk there is.
Right.
Except you're the expert. You're the one who knows how the court's going to work. You've been there and you've done this a few times. So we don't need to fully break everything out up front. Why? Not every divorce is going to end up being knockdown, drag out. They're not all going to take, 2 years. It's going to be different. But as you start to think about it, there is a way and to get away from hourly by breaking it down into either smaller tasks or set time frames, from that first meeting through the first motion being filed. Getting motions done will cause this. If we've got a mediation, it will cost you this.
Right.
And people know this is what it will take. So as you think about things now, what's a small task that you could break out and still, without completely upsetting the practice, what is something you could break off at the front of your representation that would be disconnected from hourly?
I think preparing initial documents for filing or responsive documents and then representation at that first temporary hearing. It is very rare in a contested case that there is not a what's called a motion for temporary relief and a temporary hearing that occurs within about a month to 2 months of filing the action. So, and that's really where a lot of the big work happens up front. So preparing for that hearing, representation at that hearing, the judge usually has one of the attorneys draft the order. So if I'm assigned the order, drafting the order. So kind of from signing, preparing pleadings to end of first hearing, that's a good chunk out of work that I can kind of control for. I know how much time it generally takes.
Okay. And one of the things you mentioned was it's not often, but something goes sideways on that. How often do you think, is it 1 in 10, 1 in 20 that would go have some motion that requires significantly more work?
I would say that I wouldn't know that up front, probably closer to 1 in 20 to that first hearing, because I've had cases where someone's come and said, I need this to be filed on an expedited or emergency basis. And even up front before you sign the representation agreement and prepare those pleadings, hey, this is going to be a more involved first little stretch of the case. So I would say it's very rare up through that first hearing, unless for some reason that hearing was to get continued or dropped or kicked down the road a far way. You kind of know work from signing the representation agreement up through the end of that first hearing, generally.
Okay. So out of that, and the way I usually describe it, both internally and sometimes here on the podcast, for any 10 clients of mine, 7 are going to be straightforward, super easy. If we were billing hourly, we'd be way above whatever our hourly billing rate is. 2 out of those 10, we're going to work for. It'll take more effort, but it's nothing that causes us to question our sanity or what we've chosen. And then the last one is the one where we raise prices because it's the one where we say, all right, well, we were pulling our hair out. If it sounds like for you, it's the 1 out of 20 where 1 out of 20, it would mean then that probably 4 to 6 maybe are ones where whatever that price is, you're earning your keep in a way that if you're doing it hourly, whatever you build out hourly for would probably approximate your price. That one will say maybe you would have earned half rate, 3/4 rate. And so we need the other, call it 15 for easy numbers, needs to be, we need to balance it out so that over the course of 20, it's working out to a price that you're comfortable with. Now, you don't have to get into specific prices here, but if you thought, here, 20 preliminary workups, first hearings, if you had 20 of those come in, I would start with what would you expect over 20? Then divide that by X, or divide that by 20 to get whatever your first initial price is.
Okay.
And thinking about that, does that resonate? Do you say, well, I'd need to bump it up 5%, 10%?
Yeah, I think that would make sense. Like I generally, even in looking at my past cases, could tell, hey, here's generally what the time that went in. Again, because I'm billing hourly, I can see that. I can say, here's how the average ran. Here was a really complicated case. Here was one that was relatively easy. And here's generally how long it would take. Maybe not do a 1-to-1 hourly rate, but kind of say, okay, and understanding also that over time, those efficiencies are going to continue to grow. What is a healthy spot that I can sit on with that initial amount and be comfortable, even if I get a really crazy one or a light one, would those even out? And I think that is a place I could get to pretty easily.
Right. And so the other thing to think about, because there will be the times, those 1 in 20 where you're going to pull your hair out, but you're also going to know you got paid up front.
Right.
Your client knows what they've paid, and they don't have to worry about getting the surprise sticker shock bill from you. So you're making it easy for them. It's Bill and Sue, or Bill, I guess, because it's just one client. It's not married clients like mine. Bill, it's going to cost you X to get you through the first hearing. After the first hearing, we will know more. We will know what your spouse's lawyer looks like, and you probably already know what most of the other folks in town are. So you might say it's X if it is Mr. Smith as opposing counsel, and it's X plus 5 if it's Mr. Jones. You might be able to dial in more on that as you go along. But it's going to make it easy for you because you're not tracking time. It's going to make it easy for your clients because they've paid once and they've figured that out and they don't have to worry about it. And so thinking about how do you come up with that number, we kind of went through that. Then it's what do you need to build in, and you will find things to add to it because you're probably going to want to build in a budget for fees of we're going to have to file this many motions or whatever. Your budget for that is X. So completely dropping hourly is going to be a big task. But even with that, that should be taking some big sting out of what it sounded like you were dealing with.
Yes, I think so.
Well, Greg, looks like one of my dogs is going to take up more of my afternoon than I needed. But we've been talking for a while.
Yep.
This is probably as good a place as any to close it down for right now. We'll follow up with you. We'll pick an episode in the future and have you back just to see how things went on both building out values and hiring, but also how things have gone as you've built out your fixed fee pricing. Greg, if people are looking to follow along with you, find you on the internet, what's the best way to find you?
I am on Instagram, Twitter, and I'm at Greg Steele Law, GregSteele Law. And that's the best way to get in contact with me. I haven't become one of these cool lawyers who's on TikTok or anything like that yet. So
don't worry, I haven't either.
Twitter and Instagram are usually the places that I live. So you can find me there, Greg Steele Law.
Excellent. Greg, thanks so much for coming on and sharing all this stuff with us.
Thanks, John.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at fivestarcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@fivestarcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.